coming to a close. Welcome to session 7 of Motivating Reluctant Learners. We've talked so much about the theory and application of ideas on what we can do to motivate learners. And we figured out that ultimately motivating unmotivated students starts with relationship. Currencies and investing are just a way of conceptualizing that relationship and helping us understand that what happens between us and our students is transactional. We give and we get. And when we see our relationship and partnership with students in this way, we can understand that any breakdown in partnership is really a breakdown in that transaction. So we have to fix the elements of that transaction if we are going to repair the relationship. And some of you, might bristle at my description of, describing this partnership between teachers and students using language usually only associated with the marketplace. And you might even feel that, seeing motivation as an investment decision commoditizes learning in some way. And those reservations are understandable, but the truth is that all relationships, all partnerships we have in life are transactional. And in healthy partnerships, the transaction is mutually beneficial. And in dysfunctional ones, that transaction is one-sided or mutually destructive. So, even in the most altruistic of exchanges, the giver gets something out of it. Often just the joy of serving others is what happens. But what we give and what we get drive all human interactions. So you can accept this view of the classroom. It will open up an array of possible ways to meet your students' needs. An approach to motivation based on helping students invest their currencies in the classroom, it serves this altruistic purpose. It helps us start where our students are rather than where we think they ought to be. It communicates to our students that it's okay for them to be exactly who they are, while also showing them opportunities to grow and become better or more expanded versions of themselves. And it helps students learn to, love learning on their own terms, rather than, participating in class, try hard, complete assignments, and challenge themselves because you tell them to. They get to the point where they can do these things because doing them is personally important to them. And as we embark on this, new approach to motivation, I'm going to remind us of a couple key points to keep in mind. And that first key point is don't rush it. Helping disengaged learners invest in the classroom takes time, and we can't expect students to turn around completely on day one. Instead, keep investing in them. Pay attention to their currencies and find ways to connect and integrate their currencies into both our curriculum and our classroom environment. And eventually, students will begin to come around. The second reminder is to build tolerance for risk over time. Asking students to invest in the classroom involves this degree of risk on their part. And a risk tolerance is like a muscle that gets stronger with regular exercise. We build a series of smaller risks, and we help students navigate these risks successfully before asking them to take on bigger ones. The next reminder, we cannot control students. Effective motivation is not about getting students to do what we want them to do. That's manipulation. Effective motivation is about helping students understand the value of school in terms that matter to them. Then our students are free to make the choice of whether or not they want to make that investment. It's their decision. We're just along to set up the circumstances to help them make that investment. Remember that motivation is not compliance. Many students comply with rules and procedures, not because they are motivated, but because it's easier for them to comply than to refuse, or because they are afraid of the consequences otherwise. And in a very real sense, these students are also reluctant learners. Look past compliance for signs that students are making an investment, no matter how small, in your classroom and in their own learning. And if we can't find this evidence, then we take action. A next reminder, don't forget the emotional side of motivation. Often we attempt to convince students to invest in our classroom by making a logical case. But the decision to invest is not purely logical. We have to address the emotional payoff of the investment. So we don't just demonstrate value in terms of what investing in their learning will do for them, but we also demonstrate value in terms of how it will make students feel. Don't forget the emotional side of motivation, but also be careful not to resort to fear tactics. Many of our attempts to motivate students in school are based on fear. We tell them that if they don't learn this now, we're going to have a tougher time in middle school, or they'll fail the class and they have to go to summer school, or they won't get into a good college, they won't go anywhere in life. And although these warnings may be true or have a hint of truth, fear is a poor motivator, and it can end up paralyzing students instead of pushing them. So hope, on the other hand, is a very powerful motivator. Students need to get hope and have hope and be given hope that they can do what we're asking them to do. And, they need us to show them how making an investment will lead to those rich payoffs that really matter to them. And finally, this is a highly nuanced process. We've talked about a ton of application and theory in this course, and although our conversations have laid out a series of steps, how you engage in each of those steps will entirely depend on who you are, your teaching, your leadership context, and most importantly, the needs of your students. So think through each of these steps we've talked about in the last several weeks and adapt them as needed. Ultimately, showing students how to take their currencies, their investments, their abilities, their experiences, preferences, talents, and everything else that makes them who they are, and invest them in our classroom is the key to motivating reluctant learners and keeping them motivated over time. It means building classrooms where students feel safe being who they are, and it means recognizing and taking advantage of opportunities within and beyond our curriculum to help students learn in ways that work best for them. When we can do that, we make it possible for reluctant and resistant and unmotivated students to rewrite their legacies of failure and disengagement and become motivated to change their relationship with school, with us, and with learning. And it's worth the investment. I was thinking about something the other day, and it was this. I realized that, before we read this week's chapter, I came to this understanding that most of us, in my conversations with so many different teachers, came into this profession not because we love to teach, but because we love to learn new stuff. It's what got us excited about, being a teacher while we were students, and it's what continues to get us excited about being a teacher as adults. Is we love that idea of learning, and I try to remember that as I read through this week's chapter. So our homework this week is to read through that chapter 5, which is Spark Enthusiasm for Learning. And I want to ask the question, what are 2 strategies from that chapter that you might implement or enhance in order to make instruction more enjoyable for your unmotivated students? The second question I want to ask is, using movement to occupy or take a break from instruction is sometimes key to sparking enthusiasm for some students. And so what are some strategies that you can use to make that happen and to find time and to sprinkle that in? And the last question this week is, how might you make your instruction more relevant to a student who tunes out in your class, but that loves a certain sport or activity like baseball or painting? So those are our questions this week. I'm very excited to see how you put everything we have talked about in this series together and what you come up with in reading and making connections to the text.